Jacob Elordi gets sold like this tall, quiet, unreadable guy, always in dark shades, carrying a book, looking like he just stepped out of some old movie people pretend they totally watched. That image works, and it works really well, but when you line up the romances, the quotes, the fashion moves, and the little resets after each era, the pattern starts looking way less random. This isn't just a breakup rundown, it's a closer look at how dating headlines, selective seriousness, and even rumor culture can all feed one climb. On one side, you've got the brooding actor brand. On the other, you've got a dating history that somehow keeps landing right where the cameras already are. So the question is simple. Is that contradiction real, or is it the whole plan? The first time people really started clocking it was back in the Netflix years. Start with Joey King, because that's where the public pattern first got hard to ignore. They met through the kissing booth, dated while the movie turned into a giant teen hit, then broke up while the franchise still had more life in it, which meant they had to keep promoting this big love story after their real one had already burned out. That alone would have been messy for anybody. But what people really noticed came after, when Jacob seemed eager to put distance between himself and the exact thing that made him famous, almost like the movie, the fandom. And the whole teen heartthrob label had become something he needed to outgrow in public as fast as possible. And that shift didn't look accidental. He started talking in a way that pushed against the image Netflix had handed him, and the vibe turned from young rom-com lead to moody, serious actor who wanted everyone to know he had bigger plans. You could feel the cleanup happening. The books, the stripped back fits, the luxury labels, the bored with fame attitude, all of it built a shell around him that said, "Don't put me in that cheesy box, I'm aiming higher than that." That's what makes the Joey chapter matter more than regular X drama. It wasn't only a breakup, it felt like the first visible cut in a bigger career edit, where the past got treated like an awkward draft, and he moved quick to publish a cooler version of himself. Nobody knew if that was insecurity, ambition, or both, but the effect was the same. Joey stayed attached to the franchise story. Jacob started floating above it. A lot of women know that feeling, being part of someone's rise, then getting cut out of the final version. But that was only phase one. Then came Zendaya, and this is where the image game got sharper. The rumors around them had everything: co-star chemistry, stylish sightings, secrecy, and two very online fan bases ready to inspect every airport photo and every outfit. It played like a high-gloss maybe relationship, and because Zendaya already carried fashion credibility, prestige TV heat, and real star power, even being loosely linked to her pushed Jacob into a different lane. He didn't just look famous, he looked adjacent to a cooler tier of fame. What made people side-eye that era even more was the way it got handled in public. At one point, he tried to flatten the speculation with that sister-style framing, and a lot of people didn't buy it because the whole thing had already lived as this sleek, whispered romance in public. So instead of reading like privacy, it landed for some people like control, like he wanted the benefits of the association without getting pinned down by it once the story no longer served him cleanly. Then the strategy got smarter. Around that same broader climb, Kendall Jenner rumors added another layer, even without becoming some fully confirmed public romance. The timing mattered. He was moving deeper into fashion circles, getting photographed in the right places, and looking more comfortable inside that luxury world. Kardashian proximity can blow up attention fast, but it can also mess with a guy trying to sell himself as a capital A actor. So even the rumor lane around Kendall fit the pattern people kept noticing: get close enough to absorb the heat, but not so locked in that the actor brand gets swallowed by tabloid noise. And this next chapter is where people really noticed. Kaia Gerber is where the curation looked the most complete. Their whole aesthetic matched. The paparazzi walks looked expensive without trying too hard. The West Hollywood couple optics felt almost pre-edited. And Kaia came with fashion family status that slid him further into that polished downtown art boy space he seemed to want. He wasn't only dating Kaia, he was stepping into a full ecosystem, one where the clothes, the venues, the friend group, and the photos all said the same thing. Then people started noticing another habit: the digital cleanup. Exes faded from Instagram, old traces disappeared, entire eras felt archived, then quietly removed, and maybe that's normal after breakups, sure, but stacked on top of everything else. It fed the idea that each romance got absorbed into a rebrand, then wiped once the next version of Jacob needed more room. That part hits people hard because it feels familiar. You help build the story, then one day the story acts like you were never there. And once you see that pattern in the dating history, you start spotting the same control in the rumors, the styling, and the rare moments when the mask slips. Then Olivia Jade entered the picture, and this pairing hit different because it clashed with the character he'd spent years shaping. Olivia came with the college admissions scandal cloud, influencer baggage, and a very glossy tabloid energy. So for a guy pushing this private, literary, "Don't look at me too hard" image. The match felt off right away. That's why people kept staring at the photos, the walks, the coffee runs, the low-key but somehow perfectly shootable outings. They looked casual in the way celebrity outings sometimes look a little too casual. Not proof of some master plan, obviously, but enough to keep the conversation going because the setup looked polished even when the relationship itself looked random. That bigger gossip cycle matters with Jacob. Online, he gets talked about less like a boyfriend and more like a guy always hovering near the next version of his brand. A rumor pops up, fans start mapping the timing. Somebody notices who he followed, where he went, who else was in the room, and suddenly the whole thing turns into pattern tracking. Wait until the end, because this is where the tension around him really hardens. People don't only react to who he's linked with, they react to the sense that each link fits a lane he's already trying to enter. Fashion lane, prestige lane, sex symbol lane, cool guy mystery lane. It all starts to feel tested in public before anything fully settles. A lot of stars do some version of that, and that's where the Timothée Chalamet and Austin Butler comparison comes in. They all work the same young leading man market, and none of them live outside image control, but Jacob's version lands colder for a pretty simple reason. With Timothy, the chaos looks a little more loose, almost like the mess is part of the charm. Austin leans more classic, more studied, and people can still read the performance in that, sure, but it doesn't carry the same wipe the board clean feeling. Jacob gets read as more deliberate because the resets keep showing up, especially after women who were very visible parts of a phase suddenly stop fitting the next one. Then Saltburn blew the whole thing open in a different way. The movie pushed his sex symbol image into overdrive, internet thirst went insane, and suddenly he wasn't just the brooding actor guy anymore. He was the body, the bathtub discourse, the meme, the clip, the object people kept reposting. But instead of settling into that and letting the wave define him, he still seemed committed to the serious artist angle, which made the split even sharper. He wanted the credibility and the frenzy at the same time. And that's a hard balance to hold when the internet grabs one scene and turns it into your whole public identity for months. Then came the Australia incident, and that was the first time the cool distance cracked in a way people could actually point to. A radio producer joked about the bathwater scene, there was a reported confrontation, police got involved, and suddenly the image of the controlled, unreadable star looked a lot less locked down. She later said her side, his side, stayed tighter, and the investigation itself became part of the story because it suggested something people had already suspected. The mystery works best until somebody pokes at it too directly. Then the management shows, then the irritation shows, then the whole polished detachment thing starts looking less natural and more maintained. Maybe there's no chaos behind the curtain. Maybe there's something more controlled, more intentional. Because if you look closely, nothing actually feels random. It feels structured, almost like every phase has a beginning, a peak, and a clean exit point. And the reason people stay hooked, a shift that feels too smooth to be accidental and too repeated to ignore. Taken together, the stack becomes harder to dismiss. The romances don't just feel like relationships anymore. They start to look like era transitions, each one arriving at a different stage of his career trajectory, each one aligning with a different level of visibility. The rumor lane doesn't just create noise, it quietly builds anticipation for the next version. The fashion world doesn't just style him, it reshapes the frame he exists inside. And slowly, something subtle happens in the background. Old traces don't just fade, they disappear at the exact moment they stop matching the current narrative. Not loudly, not dramatically, just efficiently. And that's the part people keep circling back to, because it doesn't necessarily mean anything was fabricated, it doesn't mean the connections weren't real, but it does suggest something sharper underneath. Every public chapter seems to arrive with a shift in image. Every relationship seems to exist inside a larger transformation, and every ending feels like a quiet reset button being pressed, not to erase the past, but to reframe it. So the question stops being about who he dated and starts becoming about what version of him each era was building. Because in Hollywood, nothing exists outside perception for long, and sometimes the most controlled stories are the ones that never admit they're being controlled. So maybe he isn't messy in the usual celebrity way. Maybe he's managed heavily. And the reason people stay hooked is because every so often you catch the seams. Taken together, the stack is hard to ignore. The romances keep lining up with upgrades in status. The rumor lane keeps feeding whatever phase comes next. The fashion world keeps giving him a sharper frame, and the old traces keep disappearing when they stop matching the current version. That doesn't mean he invented himself out of thin air. It might just mean he's brutal about editing, and that's why this sticks. If every era ends with him looking bigger while the women around him look filed away, people are going to read intent into that. The more he tries to float above the machine, the more he looks like a guy who knows exactly where every camera is.